Guys, what's going on? This is Matt from Patriots Corner. Oh man, I have not done a podcast in some time, but we are honored to have former Marine Raider Nick Koumalatsos. Nick, did I pronounce the last name correctly?
It's close enough.
Nick K, yeah,
Yeah,
badass,
there we
right?
go.
Badass, wise giver. I could, I could go on for hours. How you doing, Nick?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you have such an incredible story, um, unlike others. And I got to tell you also, by the way, everybody, if you want to share, what's your Instagram handle and YouTube page? You are so insightful, man.
It's all my name, Nick Koumalatsos. So pretty, try to keep it pretty simple across the board. But yeah, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere that people can find something, information. I try to be there.
I love it because I've been able to gain a lot from your videos, just about challenges and then being comfortable versus being uncomfortable, and we'll dive into that later because that's a big topic that I gained a lot of insight from. But I want to start first off. So Nick, growing up, where did you grow up?
Well, I originally Florida, I guess you could say, but we started by the time I was 2 years old, we moved around a ton. Like we were moving around every 6 months, and we're not from a military family. My mom, I think, was just doing her best to raise two boys, and so she kind of had to go where the work was. And so I make a joke all the time that she was running from the law, but that's not the case. That the what was going on. She was just I think she was just kind of moving from one job to the next, and where we could live and where we could make money and survive. And so, yeah, kind of all over Florida. We moved out west for a while. It was a very interesting childhood. So I remember waking up probably a couple times, waking up and being in the car and be like, where are we going? We're like, oh, we're moving to Arizona. And I was like, okay, well, roger that. But yeah, but mainly Florida. Once I kind of hit teenage years, I stayed in Panama City, Florida, until I joined joined the Marine Corps.
I was actually down in Panama City, Florida for spring break 2 years ago. Wow, it was incredible.
Yeah. You should have seen it in the 90s.
Oh my God, I'm sure it was crazy. And you were growing up there in the '90s, so that had to be sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can say sweet. Sure. Yeah. Like it's the biggest college at the time. It was probably the biggest college spring break. The laws were much different. The whole town was much different. But I would say that's where I also got into a lot of trouble.
Well, so moving around to all the different states, I remember from one of your clips with IGTV, you kind of specify on being comfortable versus being uncomfortable. Did that
Right.
shake up in the shift from state to state? Do you think that helped you mold, or did that help mold you into who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, at the time as a kid, you're not in a place long enough to really make friends. You're not really, in a place to, put down roots. And, for most people, most parents know that children really kind of crave stability, whether they know it or not. They really crave stability and want their life to kind of know what's happening. And I think that the fact that mine wasn't, as much as I didn't like it at the time, and changing schools, because I mean, for a kid, changing schools every half year and every years, that's kind of painful. You know what I mean? You're having
Sure.
to sniff out the new hierarchy and who's doing what and where you got to be and what do you got to do and what classes. I mean, that's a lot for a kid. So at the time I didn't like it, but looking back at it now, I mean, man, that was what a kind of a gift it was, because joining the Marine Corps and living out of a bag and traveling all over the world for 12 years, it really was no adjustment whatsoever. Like going to boot camp, moving to different training sites and different schools and being all over the place and living out of a sea bag, it did not affect me in the least. Like it was not I didn't get homesick. I didn't get and you hear a lot about that in youth, like getting homesick and just wanting to go home. And that wasn't me. Like I was down for the adventure and throwing stuff in a bag and getting on a bus or getting on a plane and going from point A to point B it was the opposite. It was just absolutely nothing. I had no issues with it whatsoever. So I think it kind of prepared me to be super flexible in travel. And even now in my age now, and as much as I travel for work and, travel for adventures to film and things like that, I travel with sometimes I travel with some people that aren't that flexible with international travel.
Sure.
And they get their panties in a bunch and like, well, this should be this way, or why don't they have this? Or, I love, well, why don't they have this food or this beer? It's like, well, bro, you're not in America. Like, you're in a different country. Like they don't give a shit about your beer and your food. And just little things that you kind of, that we take for granted. And, like, well, I have to have my own room. And, even at my age now, like I can share a room with a squad bay of people and it doesn't affect me, and most Americans are so soft and so just, they're like, well, I need my, my certain bed, I need my privacy, and I need it all to be a certain way. And, because I grew up and then the Marine Corps is like, I just don't operate that way and I don't think that way. So it's much easier for me to, be comfortable in whatever environment that I'm in. So I think absolutely, I think it set me up for success, even though I might have not liked it when I was 7.
Well, so moving around too, I mean, were you playing sports at a young age as well, or was it hard to involve yourself?
I mean, my mom tried. I think I played soccer when I was like 6 or something like that. I might have actually scored a goal for the other team. And then she tried to throw me in basketball at one point, and I remember we were playing a game, and I think I was at like the half court. And the other team said, just shoot it. And I went for it. And of course, I think it went like 12 feet and fell down. It was a kid. But yeah, no, sports weren't my thing, man. As much as I, am into being an athlete now, and I was, kind of being a tactical athlete when I was in the service, that was not my thing. And I think it's just because we were never stationary long enough for me to really pick up something and kind of develop it. But yeah, I think it was because of the lack of interest because of that. I never really got rooted anywhere. I remember one time, my mom walked into my room and she's like, are you going to unpack? I think I had my stuff in a bag or a box. I think it was a box or something like that. She said, why haven't you unpacked? And I said, well, why? We're just going to be leaving pretty soon anyway, so I'm ready to roll. So that mentality of just like always being ready to punch out was there at a very young age. I think she thought that was very sad. I think that kind of hurt her feelings. It was like, oh man, he's not even, like my kids don't even unpack anymore because we move around so much. But honestly, I think it created a very solid, just a flexibility to be able to do a lot of things. But yeah, because of that, I don't think sports was really a huge, priority.
And do you think that even when you saying, why would we unpack, that was just, you had already adapted to what you were experiencing? I mean, as far as that was right. It wasn't a mentality to hurt your mom's feelings by any means.
No, not at all. I was just adjusted. It wasn't like a negative thing. I wasn't sad because we were moving. It was just the fact that it was like, I'm ready to roll. Like if we have to go, I'm not going to unpack. So I have to redo it all. Like I can just live out of this box. I mean, I might say it kind of sounds sad, but it wasn't. It's not the way it's meant to be sound. You know what I mean? I was just prepared and ready.
No, I agree with you. I think that that's such a cool thing too, because I think we're noticing that just in life in general, as kind of time presses on, how we see a shift from what used to be, I guess, a normality back then. Now could have changed to completely something different. And I think that that's an incredible trait to have too. I mean, I love when you go over the being comfortable versus being uncomfortable. I mean, that is something that could help you throughout life, I feel like, just with anything.
Yeah, and I think people want a lot, right? And
Sure.
I gave a talk out in Oregon and talked a little bit about this. generally people want things, right? They want to make more money. They want to get career promotions. They want to lose weight. They want to get more muscles. They want to be in better shape. They want to have a better relationship with their significant other. They want their kids to act right. They want things, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they want them to happen just kind of, I think the majority of people just want them to kind of happen organically. So they just expect these things to get better. They just expect all this stuff to happen. And I look at that as a sense of entitlement. Like that goes right back to being entitled to, whatever that you want. Like you're not entitled to shit, man. Like doing the same thing and expecting a different thing is insane.
Absolutely.
And so people want to sit on their couch and in their little comfort zone and expect all these things to happen. You probably know that I work with a lot of veterans, and I have a lot of veteran messaging, and a lot of guys, and I don't know if you read my book, but they'll say, whatever, they're dealing with some issues, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. What are you doing about it? Nothing. Well, I'm just, going through life. Okay, well, you're going through life and you're depressed and your life sucks. Maybe you should change some things. Maybe you should get your ass off the couch and go start exercising. Or maybe you should go to link up with a club or go find a group or go, like, we have climbing programs that we do every Thursday night. So why don't you meet up with one of those? Like there's so much stuff. There's so many people out there getting connected. But then these individuals just sit there and just like they're complaining about where they're at in life, but they're not willing to put in the work because they're comfortable. It's comfortable to just be in their little comfort zone and with their little binky and just hang out and expect things to change around them without actually putting in any work whatsoever, right? So that's kind of my thought process is like, if you want things to get better, you have to get uncomfortable. You have to put yourself in an uncomfortable. You think that you're going to make, let's use the military for an example. You think you're going to go be a Green Beret, a Navy SEAL, Marine Raider, or a Ranger without some uncomfortable situations? No,
Absolutely
man, your
not.
whole life, your whole life is being uncomfortable. Like you get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like every day you wake up, you get a shot to the nuts, and then that's how you start your day.
Yeah.
And then from there on out, you just have this ache in your stomach, and you're going to throw up, and you're going to be tired, and you're going to be hungry, and you're going to be cold, and that's it. But the thing is, because you're willing to go through that, right? Because you're willing to be uncomfortable, you're going to achieve something that very, very few do. And if you continue down that road of being uncomfortable, like you will actually make it and you'll actually push forward. But those people that allow that like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this, it hurts and it doesn't feel good, and, they're gonna wash out. And then you know what? They're always gonna think, what could have been? What would have happened if I just allowed myself to be uncomfortable, and then be okay with being uncomfortable? And then you take that on a bigger scale, right? Like I like to look at people's relationships and go, are you having uncomfortable conversations with your significant other? Are you having uncomfortable conversations with your kids? Because I have, and because of that, my relationships with my kids are stronger.
Sure.
It's like just like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and just walk around, drink coffee and sip your drink and talk to people and do a couple sets here and there, and just basically you're just going to go say that you went, are you really going to make any sort of progress in your physical fitness?
No.
Whatever your goals are, absolutely not. But if you go in there and you get real fucking uncomfortable and you make your muscles hurt and you're sweating and you're like putting work in, and it's like, yeah, it sucks, it hurts, it burns.
But that's the best thing in the world. It's like, it's working for you.
Yeah, exactly. But people don't, people don't want that feeling. Like, especially, it's not every woman, but there's a lot of women out there. We wrote a training program, a 16-week training program, Josh and I, for females, because we were being asked to. And a lot of, women get in there and they're like, oh, it's kind of tough. It hurts. It's like, well, yeah, you're not going to walk in there and do some stretching and walk out and lose the 30 pounds that you're wanting to lose. Like, no, you have to go in there and do the reps, get that burn going, burn some freaking calories, and then not stuff your face with McDonald's in a pumpkin spice latte. Sorry, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. It's going to suck. But I always, when it comes to physical fitness stuff, I'm always like, your future self will thank your present self.
Hell yes.
But that's it. That's where the growth happens, is in that uncomfortable zone. And the more that you do it, the more comfortable you get in that uncomfortable zone, and you're able to push even further. And I don't think people really think about it in those ways. And, you know, I just trying to tell people, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
And you know what's so funny too is that some people would think that that's such a crazy statement, and I think that really sets the barrier as to where certain people lie on the grid when it comes to a subject such as that one. Me personally, I always used to say, I know there's a quote. It's smarter, not harder, and
Right.
by no means would I ever look to do something stupidly. But I hated that quote growing up. I really did. It just drove me insane. And I think it's because how my dad molded me. But it's almost as if you're tasked with splitting logs, and you have a splitting maul versus a log splitter. Well, I've just been so ingrained of learning from my dad and my mom, I'd rather use the maul just because it's adding more benefit. It'd be easier for me to use the log splitter, but at the same time, that extra work that you're putting in is just going to mold you with something else, whether it's writing a story, whether it's singing or anything. That's my own belief.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So,
and
go on. I'm sorry.
How are you going to move forward? That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I want to be able to like, I want a life hack. I make this joke, but I'm like, I want a triple deluxe. I want to double down. I want to level up. And how do you do that? You can't do that from your comfort zone and sitting on the couch.
Absolutely
you gotta be smarter than the average bear, and you gotta push forward.
Hell yeah. So, what was it like kind of growing up? I mean, that kind of pushed you towards the Marines. I know that you had said you were moving around. Was there anything else that happened early childhood that kind of altered your life to then joining the Marine Corps?
No, I wouldn't say I would. Not that I can remember. You know, it was a little different for me. So it's funny. I was talking about this yesterday on a podcast. I got in trouble a lot. You know, I had some felonies and some things happened in my youth. All my fault. I'm not a victim. I did everything that I was charged for, and everything that happened was all on me. But shortly after that, I realized that was not the life that I wanted to live, and I saw where that road was going, and what, you know, it's almost like I had foresight enough to go, if I continue down this road, this is what's going to happen. And so I started to take corrective action. Well, I did take corrective action. I did so well that, you know, 10th grade year, that summer, I was working 2 jobs, and I was making anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 a month, you know, with tips and hourly wage for what I was doing. But I was working from 6 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. That was my life.
Sure.
With one day off, and here I am, 16 years old. So when it came time to go back to school for my 11th grade year, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm not giving up this money to go sit in this system where really they just kind of cater to the lowest common denominator, and it's wasting my time, right? And I was a CD student. I was probably barely passing, but I just didn't put a lot of value in it because, let's be honest, they didn't put a lot of value in it, and I didn't see what I was gaining from it. But yet on the outside, I was gaining a lot. Like I moved out. I think I was like 17. Moved out to the beach, had my own place, was working, you know, had my own life. And I think that shortly after, I'm going to say shortly, probably a year of that, I just felt like this can't be it. I'm 17 going into 18, and I'm like, this can't be all there is to life, right? Like, you just work and then go home, and then work and go home, and you just repeat that process until you die.
Holy shit, this sounds a lot like my life. Keep going.
You know what I mean? Like, and it frightened me. I was scared, and I did not, as great as it was at the time, I wanted more, and I wanted, not to sound cliche, but I was like, this can't be all that's worth living for. There's got to be more. There's got to be more to it. And so I pulled the plug on all of it. I mean, I went to go see the recruiter, and he was like, "Get the hell!" I mean, I don't know if you've seen my "Who I Am" video on YouTube, but it's a pretty funny video. But they basically shut me down, and then that was the best thing they could have done for me, was shut me down, because I'm a rebel at heart, and as soon as they told me no and all the reasons, that just became my mission to prove them wrong. And so I nuked my life, man. I was making all this money at a place on the beach, and I nuked it all. Ended up moving in with my grandmother in her old place, working a job for minimum wage so that I could go to school, and I just turned my whole life upside down, so that I could, because my mission became to join the Marine Corps.
Sure.
And I looked at the other branches. I didn't even think I even talked to a recruiter. I just looked, I window shopped the other branches. And back then there wasn't really internet or anything. I mean, there was, but not really for anything that we could utilize for. But, I went and window shopped the recruiting things, and literally outside, I went and looked at the recruiting stations, looked at their media, and was like, yeah, this is not for me, man. It seems like it's more, inclusive than exclusive.
Sure.
And the Marine Corps just looked very exclusive. They were just like, listen, we don't promise you. Their whole slogan, slaying dragons, and we don't promise you a rose garden. And we're basically, if you sign up, we are going to kick the shit out of you. And who knows, you might not make it. And I was like, that's what I want. I want an actual challenge in life, and I want, a life of adventure. And then, let me tell you, that is what I got. So that became my 2-year mission to do it. And then I did it, and did it very well.
Now, let me ask you, did it ever cross your mind that when you were to get to boot camp after you signed, that there was no way out? You're going to give this, you're hungry, man. You're going to give this your all each time. I
wish my life was that simple. My life was never been that simple. It's nothing, worth anything is easily gained, right? So here I am, 2 years, I'm trying to, get into the Marine Corps, and I finally do it, right? 100 letters of recommendation, waivers for felonies, had to go to college, had to take the ASVAB 3 times because I needed a certain score because I had a G. I mean, it was just absurd the amount of times that I needed all kinds of, evals and waivers and interviews. I mean, it was ridiculous. But again, all my fault, and they didn't owe me anything, and I had something to prove, so it was on me to make it happen. And so I did that, and so I show up to boot camp. Training day 7, I broke my wrist on the bayonet course.
I saw that.
Yeah, so after all that, you think that it's just going to be sweet, you made it, make it go through, and then become a Marine and move on about your life and start adventuring. No, man, that's not the way Nick's life rolls. If anything that I want is going to be earned, right? And there's going to be some adversity, and I'm going to have to work through that adversity. And so I got dropped to MRP, and when I did, it was I felt like it was something out of a military horror movie. There's dudes rolling around in wheelchairs. There's guys got cast up to his legs. It was a freak show basically. And
this is still when you're at Parris Island.
I was in Parris Island, yeah. And I remember there's a kid that was in the corner. There's somebody in the bathroom that tried to hang himself. This is day 1.
Wow.
There's a kid in the corner with a flashlight beating himself in the head, trying to commit suicide by self blunting him in the head with a flashlight.
This is on day 1, you said too?
This is day 1. Yeah.
Holy hell.
And oh man, it was a nightmare. And I was like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for. I can't be here. This is not me. This is not my speed. So I did. I tried to bail. I was like, let me go home. I'll heal up. I'll come back later. You know what I mean? But I don't want to be in this room with these freaking crazies. But that's not the way it works. And so I got through that mental transition period, of wanting to leave. And it did suck because, it's still recruit training. So, you're still speaking in the third person. And I spoke in the third person for almost 6 months, which is it really messes with your head for a while. But once I got through that initial shock of being around a bunch of weirdos, which there actually was there was just a couple weirdos, and the rest of them were just guys like me trying to heal up and get back to training.
Sure.
And so I took that opportunity to learn and kind of hack boot camp. And I did. I had an extra I had an extra 2.5 months to just like learn everything about the island, how it worked, what the rotations of the drill instructors were. It was almost like being in SEER school and being a captive, and you're trying to learn like rotations. You're trying to learn where the hacks are, where you go here, what training days, what happens on what training days. So I had a leg up. So I knew everything that there was to know about the test. I knew everything there was to know about drill. I knew everything there was to know about, the training cycles, what was going to happen when, who was going where, what platoons were graduating when, and what training sites they were going to. So I did. I kind of, and from the inside, hacked boot camp. So when I went back, I was immediately made the guide, and I stayed the guide the rest of the time, and ended up graduating company honor grad. And in the big grand scheme of things, people go like, oh, so big what? You were an honor grad. But it's not about being honor grad. It's about taking adversity, taking something negative that happened, and then flipping that and using that for a positive, right? And I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, right? You're 18 and I turned 19 in basic training, but that's what happened. That's what I used. I took it as, once I got over myself, I took that and turned that into a positive and said, okay, well, I'm gonna use this for my advantage, and I did. So,
now, was that a shocking feeling? I mean, as far as after experiencing everything from day one to the final day, at graduation, then to graduate as an honor grad, was that like a really heavy feeling in your head? Like, holy fuck, this is, I really did hack this. I figured out how to accomplish and then how to even go beyond.
Oh yeah, I was pretty proud. I mean, it wasn't even most like, it wasn't, I was proud, but it was almost like I earned this shit. Like I deserve it. You know what I mean? Like, and I was very confident in my abilities leaving that place going, this is who I am. And I earned every bit of it. And there was nobody that was going to be better than me. And I remember going into the boarding process, but, cause all the guides go in there and they get boarded, and they have to do a kind of a competition between all 6 of you to figure out who's going to be the number one guy. And, I remember mentally and now later in life, I'm interviewing gold medalists and interviewing some of the top world champions of certain sports and different arenas, all over the United States and the world. There's kind of a common theme, right? Talking to one gold medalist thrower, he's like, honestly, every day I imagined I could picture myself standing on that podium receiving a gold medal. And I trained to that, but it's kind of talking about willing and affirmations and being positive. Without me really knowing, that's kind of what I was doing. Like, as I was going through that training and going through that, I knew that I was going to win. I knew that I was going to be the best. I could visually picture myself being that. And that doesn't mean that you're going to fail, right? Like, failure is inevitable. That's going to happen. That's how we become success. But through my failure, which was breaking my wrist and falling apart, rising up out of that is what made me successful. If I wouldn't have done that, if I wouldn't have gotten hurt and then changed my thought process on what that situation was, there's no way I would have been company honor grad.
It's almost as if you felt what you were seeing and believing before you actually saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I believed it with every fiber of my being. And I started to use that concept throughout the rest of my career. I was definitely never the fastest. I was not the best. I make a joke that, average at best. I mean, I was really good at what I did, especially towards the end of my career. But there were guys like there were guys that were just machines, man. Like guys that would just, like, still to this day, I look back and I'm like, these guys are just amazing. They're amazing, amazing human beings, tough as nails, fast, strong. And that, like, as fast and as strong as I was never the fastest and the strongest, and or even the smartest. But what I did was, the difference was, is I believed, and I knew that I was where I was supposed to be, and I could do anything that I set my mind to. And because of that is exactly what happened. I made everything that I ever went through, and it was out of sheer will that made that happen. When it came to RIP, I was a little older when I went through RIP, Recon Indoctrination Platoon, which is what you had to go back in my day. You had to go through before you went to ARS or BRC, and you just endure, man. You endure, and you believe that you're supposed to be there. And as soon as and I watch young kids, I watch the young ones go, as soon as they doubted themselves, they would quit.
Wow.
As soon as they allowed that the question in there, that, or allowed themselves to be uncomfortable, saying that I'm too uncomfortable. It hurts too much. And then they start doubting themselves whether they can make it or not, or whether they should be there, is exactly what happens. If you start doubting that, like, maybe I bit off more than I can chew. Maybe this is not for me. Maybe I shouldn't be here. This is hard. I'm uncomfortable. I'm tired. I'm cold. I'm hungry. And that's where they break. It's not the physical thing. It's not even what is mentally being put on them. It's their own mind. It's their own mental capability to be uncomfortable and to visualize that the pain is going to stop very soon. And that's where they break, right there.
Well, I was going to ask you too, how did you, after graduation of boot camp, how did you come about special operations?
Well, it was not a direct line. Actually, when I joined the Marine Corps was not a part of special operations. They weren't a part of SOCOM.
So it hadn't been even developed yet.
No. If you look historically, the Marine Corps was asked back in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, hey, do you want to be a part of SOCOM? And the Marine Corps, of course, in their normal fashion, was like, there's no special within the special. Everybody's special. And so we don't want to play in your club. We have our own club, And so they were not a part of SOCOM. Now, over the years, Force Recon had worked heavily with Green Berets and with members of SOCOM. But it wasn't until Donald Rumsfeld in the early 2000s said, hey, we want to do a test bed, and Marine Corps needs a seat at the table. So they created Detachment 1, and took some of the most senior Force Recon guys, and then some of the most senior support personnel, a lot of support personnel with intelligence and different things, and created Detachment 1 that operated under SOCOM, and they were pretty successful. And that's what, because of that was disbanded, and then Marine Special Operations Command was stood up, with First Force and Second Force being turned into what is now Second and First Marine Raider Battalion. So it was really built off the backs of Force Reconnaissance Marines. So I had taken selection for Second Force. I had taken my screening to go to Second Force Recon, and made that and went there. After being there, I want to say, about a year, a little over a year, with one of the platoons, I got orders to go to 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion out in Okinawa. Well, while I was there, in 2006, MARSOC stood up, and Second Force became 2nd Raider Battalion, and so I got orders back to there. But of course, because of my time and everything, they and I was a staff sergeant at the time, and they said, well, Nick, you have to go back. You got to go through selection. We have a new selection process. And it was funny because it was just kind of it's an interesting time. And I was, to be honest, I was pissed. I'm like, come on, man. Like, I've been through all these different selection processes. I've been all these different schools. I'm now a platoon sergeant with Recon Battalion, and you still needed me to prove myself. So I was a little butthurt. And that was my own, I don't know what you would call it, my own age showing, my not seeing the full picture at the time. But I went through that selection process and got selected. And once I went through it, and I said, man, this is amazing. They have an amazing and to date, they have an amazing selection process where they are really, really getting the best qualified candidates. And I'll tell you why. There was recon Marines in my selection course that didn't make it. If that tells you it tells you how tough it is. And rightfully so. They didn't make it because of the right reasons. And that's when I saw that I was like, this is a next level thing, and this is something very special. And which, and I was honored to be a part of that. And I'm glad they made me go through it because I gained that perspective by going through it. And then, I spent the last half of my career there with Marine Special Operations Command as a Raider.
Now, as a Marine Raider, what was that training like? I mean, were you doing a lot of, swim training? I mean, more type of discrete stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand like that. Coming from a reconnaissance background in that day, there wasn't a huge shift. Where the huge shift was more planning and execution, and then the style of what you were doing, understanding a bigger picture of operations, and how do you affect the battle space with a very limited amount of people. Like how, and this is something that I learned right towards the end of my my reconnaissance career in Iraq. We were playing. We came off as the DA platoon, and then we went into Iraq, and we were doing the whack-a-mole stuff, and it wasn't as effective. It just wasn't. It wasn't change. It was like you put one down, and then two pop up in its place, right? So the whack-a-mole technique just wasn't working. Can it work? Sometimes you can get the right guy, and it causes some disruptions for an amount of time. But when you're fighting that kind of war, and you're fighting an idea, not a person, you have to be a lot more strategic. And that's where things like asymmetrical warfare come in, UW, and these are the techniques that we kind of applied towards the last half of that deployment, and it really opened my eyes. So when I went over to MARSOC, for me, it was a much easier transition conceptually because I understood the level of effectiveness when operating that way. And I know I might be being a little cryptic, and I'm being a little cryptic on purpose, but yeah. So the training, while yes, very intense, the entry level training is very intense, and the fact that the ability for somebody to make it is very slim unless you train the right way. Which we prepare guys for selection. We have training protocols for that Josh Hollensberger and I have built. And so that's kind of where that's kind of shifted. So.
Now, is it also something though, I notice a lot of the guys in your community in special operations say once you get there, it could be entirely different, I guess, mentally per the person than what you might have prepped for beforehand. What would your thought be on that?
I mean, the thing is like, in a day and age of people trying to, electronically hack a situation, right? Like when, in my day, joining the Marine Corps, there was no Instagram, there was no internet. I couldn't ask anybody. I didn't have access to anybody really in the Marine Corps. You couldn't prepare for it. You just did your best. The same thing with, recon and going through recon indoctrination platoon. You can't Google it. There's not a blog about it. There was no YouTube videos about it. You just kind of went. You just prepared the best that you can, and you went at it the best that you could. Today, obviously, there's a lot of other information out there, but it's still like I have young kids hit me up all the time. Well, what's the day in the life of a Raider? Well, if you want to know, go join. Go make it. But yes, it is, everybody thinks that the grass is greener, and it is to an extent. The grass is greener on the other side to an extent, but at the end of the day, it's still a job, right? It's still a job that you have to do. With any job, there's a lot of BS that you have to put up with, right? And I think that's where some of the younger generation think that you're just going to be a super cool guy, and you're not, and it's all awesome all the time. And that's just simply not the case. It's a job. There's a lot of sucky parts that goes along with it. But on the other end, there's a really lot of awesome stuff. And I tell young guys now, I say, if you go through that and you make it, do not sweat the bullshit. Do not let all the bullshit and the negativity of the job get to you to where you are not enjoying what you worked so hard to do. Right? Have your perception on point to where you are enjoying what you work so hard for.
Now, do you think going through
I think that's in life. That's a good lesson. Like we sometimes get so wrapped up into the BS of everyday life and the negativity around us that we lose sight of the things that we're actually really thankful for. And instead we don't enjoy our life, and we don't enjoy where we're at in life because we're thinking about all the bad shit.
Do you think that the training preps them for what they will experience afterwards? I mean, you mentioned how the young guys, it might be a different perception. You're going into incredibly hostile environments. I mean, dangerous areas.
Well, yeah, yes and no, not all the times, but so yes, for the basic, like you want to say level 100, 101 type stuff. Yes, they are, when they come out of ITC, they're like a full up round. They are prepared to be on a team and execute on a team. Now, what I will say is training is not the same as experience. So while you do have the training and you have the exposure to these subjects, it is not the same as actually having done it for several years.
Sure.
Right. So while it does prepare them, I would not say that they are fully ready to just go execute on their own and make things happen. Now you're talking about some of the most highest caliber individuals in the country, right? So that their work aptitude, their aptitude to learn, their work ethic is through the roof, right? They can figure shit out. They're in shape. It's a different breed of human being, to be honest. But at the end of the day, if you've never done a thing, you've never done that thing in real life. So it's like practicing for a year to be on a football team, but you've never actually played a real game. And then you have to go, when the season opens, you do your first game. You play your first game against an opponent. Now you've gained experience. Now you've actually been in the throes of battle on the field and executed, what you've been training for a year. And that's kind of what it's like. And then you become kind of a veteran in that field. So yes, it does prepare them, but you don't get the experience until you actually have to do the thing. And that's where, your senior leaders and your leaders on the team and your NCOs and your team leaders, element leaders, and that kind of thing kind of shape those individuals to prepare them to take their positions as everybody moves up.
And is that something where, after everything is said and done, after all the training, it's where you know how to react immediately in a situation? I feel like that's also something that a lot of people, or a special group of people, want, is the ability to jump when they need to.
Yeah, like how do you train? How do you train an 18-year-old? Let's just look at the basic Marine Corps. How do you train an 18-year-old to where when he hears gunfire to run towards the gunfire and not away from it, right? Like, how do you take that inherent human, I guess, condition to protect itself and to be smart and be a survivor, because that's what we are.
Sure.
To bury that and to execute in a different manner. And I think Marine Corps is probably one of the absolute best at doing that. And that comes through repetition and time and training. And I think that's something that where, not to sound too cliche and love for the Marine Corps, but that's where I think, Marine Raiders kind of and Recon Marines are different in a way, is because we do come from the Marine Corps, and we have that basic Marine Corps understanding of war fighting and this culture that they create within the Marine Corps. Well, that carries on into these other areas and other jobs within the Marine Corps. And I think that's the reason why those guys shine and do so well at what they do.
So, did being a part of the special operations teams, You must have had the opportunity to travel all over the world.
I mean, I did. I mean, back in my day, we traveled to Afghanistan a lot. But no, throughout my career and my 12 years in the Marine Corps, like I got to say, I've definitely been on the road. I mean, if I look at it from a time standpoint, out of 12 years, I added up the time when I got out. I had actually been gone for 6 years.
Holy hell!
Yeah. So out of 12 years in service, I was gone for 12 or for 6 years.
And when you would get to those locations, would you ever think back to when you were a kid per se, and say to yourself, "Holy shit! I never thought that I would be here." Now present, but back then it being future.
No, I never really thought that way. I was always kind of thinking, forward. I was always kind of just thinking like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I was always trying to, again, hack the system and try to prepare for the next thing and get that all set up. It wasn't really till I got out until I started to have some self-reflection and really look at what had really transpired over a lifetime of all of that.
Now, I want to ask too, if you're able to share, when you were going out on a mission, was there anything that you did in specific where it was kind of like repetition per se, a song, or anything that you did prior to the mission taking place?
No, I didn't have. I wasn't. I'm not superstitious. So no, I mean, it was always, as a professional warfighter, you're really looking at the mission itself. What's the information that we have? What's the execution? What are we doing? Where are all the moving parts? Especially towards later in even like mid career to end. I was in a leadership role to where do the men have the information? Do they understand where our checkpoints are? What we're doing? Why we're doing what we're doing? Is how are the radios, SATCOM? So I'm not thinking so much of like, I don't know, my special underwear in a song or anything like that. It's much more for me and what we did. It was much more three-dimensional than that. So I was very focused on all of that, having the right kit, because everybody always says like, well, what's the right this? What's the right boot? What's the right gun? Well, that's all depends on a situational dependent. There's not one tool for all jobs, right? It's about the best tool for the job. So that's what I was looking at. I was looking at all of that.
When situations would take place, is that something where you also though reflected back and kind of then understood that we are prepared to do this? Because I guess to broaden, the question is, as a kid, I was always I was looking for something in a job eventually to have where I would know how to react immediately. And is that something when you understand that you can do that, was it uplifting for you?
I was looking at it more of, you got to understand in this part of my life, I was all into who I was and what that identity was. So when I came back, I wasn't looking at it from a life standpoint of the self-awareness. I was looking at it from the job. I was looking at it from, okay, what is the after action for this mission? And we would create after actions and who did what and why and what worked where. That was all super, super crucial, right? And so that was my focus. That's the way that I looked at that. I looked at it from what happened, where are the wins, where are the failures, and what can we do better next time? And then where was the information gained? What was the level measure of effectiveness? I was looking at it from a more analytical standpoint of the actual job itself, not so much like, I'll be honest, it wasn't until I got out and I went through my whole transition that I kind of created this self-awareness and kind of started to analyze my life, my childhood, me coming up through the Marine Corps, all my time and, the regular Marine Corps with recon and then with MARSOC, until I kind of all started to kind of paint a very similar picture. But when you're in that job, it is you're in a different world. You're in a different world than everybody else. And that's why, I've done what I've done on the civilian side and supporting veterans and helping people kind of work through that stuff once you're out.
On the transition side too, I noticed it was 5 books that you have published.
No. One book called The Excommunicated Warrior that talks about, it's the story of my transition out, and through helping people, I've noticed that it was I use it as my story, but I started to learn that transitioning is not something that's a veteran issue. It's a human being issue. So I use my story because that's what my story was leaving special operations and entering the civilian world. But really, my story can be laid on top of anyone. It can be laid on top of a guy who did sports and then got hurt and didn't do it. You can say as somebody going through a divorce, somebody that's getting let go from a job. Like, we all go through different chapters of our life that changes, and then sometimes we get stuck. So I use my story through that book, and through working with people and working with veterans and all kinds of people of different backgrounds, I learned that there's a theme, and I called it the 7 stages of transition. And man, it's been wildly successful. And what I thought was going to be a veteran book really turned out to be a human being book. And yeah.
Well, and I remember seeing another clip of yours. You were talking about climbing.
Yeah.
On Instagram, and you emphasized that, overcoming that fear, or I guess confusion, it was taking a mental problem and putting it into a physical space that you had to solve.
Absolutely. And I think that's the reason why, there's a lot of veterans out there that climb, and a lot of there's people in general that climb. But my whole analogy with that is sometimes, we get a guy on a rock, right? We get on a guy on a rock wall, and they're stuck, right? They're on the walk wall. They've got halfway up, and then they're swiping their hands all over the wall, and they're like, "Man, I'm stuck. I got to come down. There's no other moves for me. There's no other things that I had nothing to grab. I can't find anything." But there's a guy on the bottom that's like, "Dude, you're so off. If you move your right hand 45 degrees up at this, at 45 degrees, and then reach, stand on your toe and reach right there. There's a huge jug. There's a huge handhold to grab onto and pull yourself up." And it just kind of clicked in my brain. I was like, that's kind of like life, right? So we all have a situation. We get stuck in a situation where we're like, I am screwed up, man. I'm fucked. I can't move to the next level. I don't know what to do. I have no outs, right? I have no out. And it's because you're in the bubble. You have this perspective of where you're at in life. But sometimes it takes an outsider to go, "Hey bro, you're not stuck at all. Why don't you just move right here and get through this?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, it's right there. That's all I had to do is just go this direction." But sometimes we can't see it because we're in it, right? We're in that situation, and we don't have an outside perspective. And with veterans or people in general that sometimes are stuck in life, I picture them up on that wall. They're just stuck on this wall. They can't grab the next thing, and all it takes is a friend to say, "No, man, you're not stuck. It's right there. You're fine. You're going to be fine. You just grab that and pull yourself up to the next ledge, and then we'll continue on. And then together we'll continue on from there."
I gotta ask too, totally random. Your last name, is it Greek?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You're like a Greek philosopher, man.
Not as good as those guys were, but I appreciate that.
Hey, well, it worked for me. Wow. That is so incredible. You have such an incredible story, Nick. Is there anything else you want to share? I know you have your company before anything that's going on or taking place in the future.
We've got, if the veterans are listening, we got Vet Expo in October, end of October. You can come out to that. I'm actually I'm leading a panel for small businesses. So I'm interviewing some I'm interviewing some business guys that have done really well. So that's going on. Obviously, you can check out all my stuff, and if you're going through any sort of life transition, or you think you're going to, man, if you read that book, it will change your life. At this point, I can say that because I've got the reviews to back it. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. If you need to find me, it's my name, Nick Koumalatsos. I'm very easy to find. That's it. I appreciate you having me on.
Nick, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. You have such an incredible story, American hero, and total philosopher. At least in my eyes, and from listening, it's stuff that I feel like everybody needs to follow, and I hope that they do, because everything you said is 100% true.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for being on Patriots Corner, and hopefully down the road we could do a follow-up.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, man.
Take care.